The glass award shattered against his skull. My best friend's husband lunging from the dark. I'm holding his security badge, warm from his pocket, stamped with my office's high-security logo. The photos are still burning in my mind. Chloe's face on my body, her smile in my wedding album. The power's out, the police won't come, and the key in my hand doesn't fit any door I recognize. Too late to run. Too late to trust. The sky over North Raleigh had turned the color of a bruised plum, heavy with the scent of ozone and wet pavement. Sarah Miller stepped out of her sedan, her heels clicking a frantic, uneven rhythm against the asphalt. The city-wide blackout had transformed the manicured suburban streets into a labyrinth of obsidian shadows. She gripped a corrupted hard drive to her chest as if it were a wounded bird. Inside that plastic shell lay the quarterly strategy for her marketing firm. Months of surgical precision, data points, and demographic maps that represented her entire claim to the senior VP position. If she didn't recover the files by midnight, the board would see a failure. And in Sarah's world, failure was a scent that predators could smell from miles away. She reached Chloe Vance's townhouse, the brick facade slick with rain. Chloe was more than a best friend. She was the only person Sarah trusted with her digital life. They had shared passwords, secrets, and bottles of expensive Pinot Noir for years. Sarah fumbled with the spare key hidden beneath a heavy stone planter, the cold iron biting into her palm. The door groaned open, releasing the cloying, sweet scent of lavender floor wax, the same brand Sarah used. It was a comforting smell, usually, but in the pitch-black hallway, it felt suffocating. Sarah navigated the darkness by memory, her thumb tracing the familiar textures of the wallpaper until she reached Chloe's home office. The air here was 10 degrees colder, smelling of dust and stagnant electricity. She clicked on her heavy industrial flashlight, the beam cutting a violent white path through the gloom. The mahogany desk loomed like a tombstone. Sarah set her jaw, her breath hitching in her throat, as she located the backup server tucked behind a row of leather-bound books. The heavy metal casing felt icy and unresponsive. She needed to find a specific driver to bridge the gap between her corrupted drive and Chloe's system, and she began to dig through the drawers with a frantic, systematic desperation. Her fingers brushed against a stack of glossy paper hidden beneath a false bottom in the filing cabinet. She pulled them out, expecting technical manuals or old tax returns. Instead, the flashlight beam illuminated a nightmare. She stared at a photo of her own wedding. There was Mark, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in his tuxedo. But the woman standing beside him wasn't Sarah. It was Chloe. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She flipped to the next page. It was a photo of Sarah's 30th birthday party at the lake. Again, Chloe's face had been digitally grafted onto Sarah's body with terrifying, seamless precision. Every detail, the tilt of the head, the exact shade of honey blonde hair, even the way the light caught the pearls, was a perfect, monstrous lie. A folder labeled Project Identity sat on the desk's desktop monitor, glowing faintly as the server's battery backup kicked in. Sarah clicked through it, her hands trembling so violently the mouse rattled against the wood. There were hundreds of files. Chloe hadn't just been admiring Sarah, she had been dissecting her. There were recordings of Sarah's voice, notes on her favorite coffee order, and a digital spreadsheet that mirrored Sarah's own apology log. The itch in Sarah's chest, the one that only stopped when she logged a social slight, flared into a burning heat. Chloe wasn't a friend. She was a scavenger, waiting for Sarah to rot so she could inhabit the carcass of her life. A floorboard creaked in the kitchen. Sarah froze. The sound was heavy, the unmistakable thud of a boot on linoleum. The silence that followed was worse than the noise, a predatory, expectant stillness. She clicked off her flashlight, plunging the room back into a suffocating ink. The smell of the house changed. The lavender was gone, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of rain-soaked wool and something chemical, like cleaning fluid. She moved toward the doorway, her socks sliding silently on the hardwood. As she reached the threshold of the kitchen, a shadow detached itself from the pantry. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by a dark, tactical mask. He didn't speak. He didn't demand money. He simply lunged. The struggle was a blur of muffled grunts and the frantic scuffing of shoes. Sarah felt a gloved hand clamp over her mouth, the smell of grease and old sweat filling her nostrils. She thrashed, her elbow connecting with something hard. A rib, perhaps. The intruder shoved her back against the kitchen island, and her hand closed around a heavy glass award Chloe had won for a local charity drive. It was cold, jagged, and weighted. Sarah swung with every ounce of terror-fueled strength she possessed. The glass connected with the side of the man's head with a sickening thunk. He groaned, his grip loosening just enough for Sarah to twist away. As he stumbled, something fell from his tactical vest, clattering onto the floor. Sarah didn't think. She dove for it, her fingers closing around a small, rectangular plastic object. She scrambled to her feet, her lungs burning, and bolted for the front door. She didn't look back as she burst into the rain, the cold water stinging her face as she dove into her car and slammed the locks. Panting, her chest heaving, she opened her hand to look at the prize she had snatched from the dark. It wasn't a car key or a house fob. It was a high-security access badge, the white plastic gleaming under the dim glow of her dashboard lights. Her breath caught. Printed on the front was the logo of her own marketing firm. Beneath the photo, a photo of Chloe looking professional and poised, were the words, Sarah Miller, Senior VP. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The intruder hadn't been a random burglar, and Chloe wasn't just planning to take her life. She had already started. Sarah threw the car into reverse, the tires shrieking against the wet pavement. She had to get to the office. She had to prove she was still there. But as she sped toward the downtown skyline, the high-pitched whine of the wind through her cracked windows sounded like a mocking laugh. When she reached the glass and steel monolith of her office building, the world felt tilted. The rain had turned into a steady, rhythmic drumming. She marched toward the revolving doors, pulling her own badge from her purse. She swiped it against the sensor. Red. The little light didn't turn green. It didn't beep with the familiar, welcoming chirp. Instead, it emitted a low, flat buzz that vibrated through her arm. She tried again, pressing the plastic so hard against the reader she thought it might snap. Access denied. Problem, Sarah? She whirled around. 2 security guards, men she had nodded to every morning for 5 years, stood behind the desk. They didn't move to help. Their faces were masks of professional indifference. My badge isn't working, Sarah said, her voice sounding thin and reedy in the cavernous lobby. There must be a glitch with the power outage. I need to get up to the 14th floor. The board meeting starts in a few hours. The older guard, a man named Henderson, whose daughter Sarah had sent a graduation gift to, looked down at his monitor. I don't see a Sarah Miller on the roster for today, ma'am. What are you talking about? I'm the lead on the quarterly report. Check again. Henderson sighed, a sound of weary pity. Look, I have a memo here. Effective immediately, Sarah Miller is no longer with the firm. Your access was revoked at midnight, and Well, the other Sarah Miller is already upstairs. She's been there since 4 a.m. The room seemed to shrink. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed at a frequency that made the back of Sarah's eyes ache. The other Sarah Miller? The senior VP, Henderson said. Look, lady, I don't want any trouble. You need to leave before we have to call the police. Sarah backed away, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers slick with cold sweat. She called Mark. He was her anchor, the man who knew every curve of her soul, the man who refused to make left turns because he wanted to keep the world safe. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. Sarah? Mark, thank God. Something is happening. I'm at the office and they won't let me in. They're saying I've been fired and Mark, Chloe is in my office. She's pretending to be me. There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end of the line. When Mark finally spoke, his voice wasn't warm. It was cautious, the tone one might use with a stray dog that looked like it might bite. Sarah, we talked about this, Mark whispered. Chloe called me. She said you had another episode, that the stress from the car accident was making you confused again. The car accident? Mark, that was a fender bender. I'm fine. I'm standing right here. She said you were hallucinating that people were stealing your work. She said you broke into her house tonight and attacked someone. Sarah, honey, you need help. Chloe is just trying to protect the firm while you get better. She's being a good friend. A good friend. Sarah's voice rose to a shriek, drawing the eyes of the guards. She's wearing my clothes. She's using my name. I think you should go to the police station, Mark said, his voice flat. Or better yet, just go home. I'll meet you there after I finish this call with the insurance adjusters. He hung up. The dial tone was a hollow, mechanical drone. Sarah stared at the screen. Her wallpaper, a photo of her and Mark at the Grand Canyon, flickered and died as the battery hit 1%. She turned and ran back to the parking garage, the concrete floors echoing with the sound of her desperation. She reached her car and yanked the door open. The interior smelled wrong. It didn't smell like her expensive leather and vanilla air freshener. It smelled like Chloe's perfume, a heavy, cloying floral scent that made her eyes water. She looked at the dashboard. The GPS screen was blank, wiped clean of her saved locations. She reached into her purse for her perfume, needing a familiar scent to ground her. She pulled out the glass bottle and sprayed it. Nothing but water, plain, odorless water. Chloe had been in her car. Chloe had been in her life, systematically replacing the substance with shadows. Sarah slammed her hands against the steering wheel, a sob breaking from her throat. She had to move. She couldn't stay here. She put the car in gear and began to spiral down the ramps of the parking garage. The squeal of her tires echoed through the empty levels, a high-pitched shriek of protest. As she reached the 4th level, a pair of headlights flared to life behind her. A black SUV, massive and predatory, lurched out of a parking space. It didn't follow at a safe distance. It accelerated, the engine roaring like a beast. Sarah gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. "What are you doing?" she whispered. The SUV rammed her rear bumper. The impact jolted her spine, her head snapping back against the headrest. She saw the driver in the rearview mirror, the same masked figure from the kitchen. But this time, he wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was using the vehicle as a weapon. He rammed her again, harder this time, pushing her toward a massive concrete pillar. Sarah's car fishtailed, the scent of burning rubber filling the cabin. She was being pinned. He was trying to crush her against the stone. At the last possible second, Sarah jerked the wheel to the right, mounting the narrow sidewalk intended for pedestrians. Her car jolted violently, the undercarriage scraping against the curb with a shower of sparks. But she cleared the pillar. The SUV slammed into the concrete with a deafening crunch of metal and glass. Sarah didn't stop to look. She floored the accelerator, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her ears. She knew that SUV. She had seen it parked in Chloe's driveway a dozen times. It belonged to Tyler, Chloe's brother. The plot wasn't just a solitary obsession. It was a family business. She drove blindly, the city blurring into a smear of gray and neon. She couldn't go home. Mark was compromised. She couldn't go to the office. The guards were compromised. She was a ghost in her own city, a woman whose identity was being erased one data point at a time. She found herself pulling into the lot of a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. The smell of burnt coffee and grease offered a momentary, gritty reality. She sat in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea, trying to think. She needed evidence. She needed something Chloe couldn't fake. But as she sat there, she realized with a cold, sinking horror that Chloe hadn't just stolen her files. She had stolen her history. The apology log, the childhood stories, the way she spoke, it was all in that Project Identity folder. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from Mark. "I've moved your things to the cabin in Asheville. Chloe helped me pack. We think the mountain air will help you clear your head. Don't come home, Sarah. It'll just make things harder." The cabin. It was a secluded spot 3 hours away, with no cell service and a single road in. It wasn't a retreat, it was a cage. Sarah stood up, her chair screeching against the linoleum. She wouldn't be sent away. She wouldn't be erased. If Chloe wanted to play at being Sarah Miller, then Sarah would show her exactly how a senior VP handled a hostile takeover. The drive to Asheville was a blur of winding mountain roads and rising mist. The air grew thinner, the temperature dropping until Sarah's breath hitched in the cold. The Blue Ridge Mountains loomed like ancient, indifferent giants, their peaks swallowed by the gray shroud of morning. She reached the cabin just as the sun began to bleed through the fog. It was a rustic structure of dark timber and stone perched on the edge of a jagged ravine. It looked peaceful, but to Sarah, it looked like a tomb. She parked her car a quarter-mile down the road and approached on foot, her boots crunching on the fallen pine needles. The smell of wood smoke drifted through the air, sharp and acrid. As she neared the porch, she saw a figure standing by the railing. It was Chloe. But it wasn't the Chloe Sarah knew. This woman was wearing Sarah's favorite vintage silk dress, the one she had worn on her first date with Mark. Around her neck were the pearls Sarah's grandmother had left her in her will. Chloe was standing exactly like Sarah. Shoulders back, chin tilted slightly upward, one hand resting lightly on her hip. She was a perfect mirror. "You're late, Sarah," Chloe said. Her voice was an exact match for Sarah's, the same clipped consonants, the same metered rhythm. "I was starting to think you'd lost your way. But then again, you always did have trouble with directions after the accident, didn't you?" Sarah stepped onto the porch, her hands balled into fists. "Give them back. The pearls, the dress, my life." Chloe laughed, a soft, practiced sound. "Your life? Sarah, look at you. You're a mess. Your hair is matted, your clothes are stained with grease and rain. You look like a woman who's had a very public, very unfortunate breakdown. Who do you think Mark is going to believe? The wife who's been calmly managing his home and his career? Or the stalker who showed up at his office screaming about doppelgangers?" "I have the folder, Chloe. I saw Project Identity." Chloe's expression didn't flicker. She stepped closer, the scent of Sarah's own perfume radiating from her skin. "Do you?" And where is it? On a corrupted drive? In a cloud account you can't access because I changed the recovery questions? You're a marketing expert, Sarah. You know that branding is everything. And right now, your brand is unstable. Sarah lunged. The struggle was visceral and ugly. They tumbled across the porch, the wood groaning beneath them. Chloe was surprisingly strong, her fingers digging into Sarah's shoulders with a strength born of desperation. They rolled toward the edge of the balcony, the jagged ravine yawning below them in the mist. "You're nothing," Chloe hissed, her face inches from Sarah's. "You're just a collection of habits and apologies. I can do Sarah better than you ever could because I actually want it. I've spent my whole life being the extra child, the one nobody wanted. But you just threw it away on spreadsheets and perfection." Sarah managed to get a hand free, shoving Chloe back. "I didn't throw it away. I built it. And I'm the one who's going to keep it," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a terrifying, calm whisper. "Mark is already convinced. He's inside right now, Sarah. Why don't you ask him who he wants?" Sarah scrambled to her feet, her heart leaping with a spark of hope. Mark, help me." The cabin door creaked open. Mark stepped out, wearing a sweater vest that looked too large for his frame. He looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked at the two women, identical in height, in hair, in the way they stood. "Mark," Sarah sobbed, taking a step toward him. "It's me. I'm Sarah. Look at my hands. Remember the scar on my thumb from when we went camping? Remember the way I take my coffee?" Mark didn't move. He looked at her with a profound, soul-crushing sadness. He didn't see his wife. He saw a threat. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Mark whispered. He stepped forward, but he didn't reach for her. He reached for Chloe. He put an arm around Chloe's waist, drawing her close. Chloe leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder in a gesture of perfect, practiced vulnerability. "It's okay, honey," Chloe whispered to Mark. "She's just confused. The nurse will be here soon." "Mark, no!" Sarah screamed. "She's lying. She's the one who attacked me. Look at the badge in my pocket." Sarah reached into her coat, her fingers fumbling for the plastic fob she had snatched from the intruder. She pulled it out, holding it up like a holy relic. "See, this is her badge. It has her name on it, but my title." Mark looked at the badge. Then he looked at Chloe. Chloe sighed, a soft, disappointed sound. "Oh, Sarah, did you steal my old badge from the trash? I told HR I lost that weeks ago. I had to get a replacement." She reached into her own pocket and pulled out an identical badge. "See? I have mine right here." The world tilted. Sarah looked at the two badges. They were identical. Chloe had anticipated the move. She had planted the stolen badge on the intruder, knowing Sarah would take it. It wasn't evidence of Chloe's guilt. It was evidence of Sarah's theft. "The medical transport is coming up the drive," Mark said, his voice shaking. "They're going to take you somewhere safe, Sarah. Somewhere you can get the help you need." "Mark, please," Sarah begged, her knees hitting the rough wood of the porch. "Don't do this. I'm your wife. I love you." "I know you think you do," Mark said, refusing to meet her eyes. "But my wife is standing right here." He turned and led Chloe back into the cabin, the heavy oak door clicking shut with a finality that sounded like a coffin lid. Sarah sat on the porch, the mist swirling around her. She was alone. She was discredited. She was a ghost. But as she sat there, her hand brushed against her wrist. Her smartwatch. It was a prototype she had been testing for a client. A high-end piece of tech designed for deep fake detection and voice analysis. It had a passive listen mode that recorded environmental audio for forensic testing. She looked at the small screen. The recording icon was a tiny, pulsing red dot. It had been running since she stepped onto the porch. She had it. Every word Chloe had said. The admission that she wanted Sarah's life. The mockery of her habits. The truth. Sarah stood up, her breath hitching. She had to play it right. She couldn't just show Mark. He would think she'd fabricated it. She needed a witness. The sound of a heavy engine rumbled up the mountain road. A white van with no markings pulled into the clearing. Two men in pale blue scrubs stepped out. They didn't look like nurses. They looked like the orderlies from the nursing home in her nightmares. Heavy set, with cold, professional eyes. "Sarah Miller?" one of them asked. "I'm Sarah Miller," she said, her voice steady. "We're here to help you, Sarah. Your husband is very worried." "I'm sure he is," Sarah said. She glanced at the cabin. The Bluetooth speakers on the porch were still active. Chloe must have been using them to play music earlier. Sarah's fingers moved with surgical precision over the face of her watch. She synced the device to the cabin's external audio system. "Wait," Sarah said to the orderlies. "Before you take me, I think you should hear something. It's a marketing presentation on the value of a brand." She hit play. Chloe's voice erupted from the speakers, amplified and distorted by the mountain air. "I can do Sarah better than you ever could because I actually want it. I've spent my whole life being the extra child, the one nobody wanted. But you just threw it away on spreadsheets and perfection." The door to the cabin burst open. Mark stood there, his face pale. Chloe was right behind him, her eyes wide with a sudden, sharp terror. "Mark is already convinced," the recording continued, Chloe's voice echoing off the trees. "He's inside right now, Sarah. Why don't you ask him who he wants?" Sarah looked at Mark. For the first time in 48 hours, he was looking at her. Really looking at her. He saw the terror in her eyes, the way her thumb was tracing the scratch on her watch, a habit she'd had since they were 20. "Sarah?" Mark whispered. He looked at Chloe. The woman beside him was frozen, her mask of perfection finally cracking. The honey blonde hair was the same, the dress was the same, but the soul was a void. "What is this?" Mark asked, stepping away from Chloe. "It's the truth, Mark," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "It's the identity she stole." Chloe didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned and ran. She bolted off the porch, her silk dress catching on the briars as she disappeared into the thick, gray mist of the ravine. The orderly started after her, but Sarah held up a hand. "Let her go," she said. "She doesn't have anywhere to go. Sarah Miller is standing right here." The police arrived 20 minutes later, their sirens a mournful wail that echoed through the mountain passes. They took statements. They looked at the recordings. They processed the crime with the same sterile efficiency Sarah used to process her marketing reports. Mark tried to touch her arm as they stood by the patrol car. "Sarah, I didn't know. She was so convincing. She knew everything." Sarah looked at him. She saw the man who refused to make left turns because he was afraid of the world. She saw the man who had chosen a comfortable lie over a difficult truth. She saw the man who had been willing to lock her away because a stranger told him to. "You should have known, Mark," she said quietly. "You're my husband. You should have known my voice. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you. We'll go home. We'll fix the accounts. No," Sarah said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the grandmother's pearls the police had recovered from the porch. They were cold and heavy. There is no home to go back to, Mark. You gave it to her. You gave her the keys, the bed, and the life. You can keep the house. I'm taking my name. She walked away from him, her heels crunching on the gravel. She didn't look back. Weeks later, Sarah sat in a small cafe in a city 300 miles away. She had a new job, a new apartment, and a new phone number. She had deleted her digital footprint, scrubbed her social media, and changed her name to something simple and unremarkable. She sipped her coffee, black, no sugar, and watched the people pass by on the sidewalk. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The perfectionism was gone. The apology log had been deleted. She was no longer a brand to be managed. She was just a person. She looked across the street. A woman was standing at the corner, waiting for the light to change. The woman was wearing a tailored navy blazer. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a precise, professional bun. She held her coffee cup with her thumb tracing a small scratch on the side. Sarah's heart stopped. The woman turned. She didn't look like Chloe. She didn't look like the old Sarah. But she moved with the same metered rhythm, the same surgical precision. The woman caught Sarah's eye. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply tilted her head, a split second after Sarah did, as if she were sinking her breath to the rhythm of a new life. Sarah looked down at her coffee. The surface of the liquid trembled. She realized then that you can change your name. You can change your city. You can even change your soul. But in a world of data and shadows, there is always someone watching, waiting for a vacancy. The cycle hadn't ended. It had just found a new market. Sarah stood up, left a $5 bill on the table, and walked out into the bright, indifferent sun. She didn't look back. She knew, with a chilling, absolute certainty, that someone was already counting her steps. 1, 2, 3. The floor didn't betray her, but the shadow was already there, perfectly parallel, waiting for the next apology.